I've just spent hours poring over basically every item in the game after being flooded with requests to make a video of what you should take, keep, and sell in Tarkov's hardcore wipe to make money and get off the struggle bus. So here it is. Obviously, the main way of getting money is looting items and then selling them. So this video is about making money first and foremost, but in Tarkov this is really complicated because every item tends to serve multiple purposes, from quest hand-ins to hideout upgrades, barters, crafts, and actual uses in raid as well. And trying to keep all of this in your mind while you're looting a container under fire is half of the battle when playing this game. So in short, what I've basically done is created a spreadsheet, because I couldn't do the video without this anyway, that's going to show you whether you need the item soon in the early game, at some point in the future, in the mid game, so maybe you can sell it now, or it's a really late game item. Because often when you look at these lists, it's either you need it or you don't, and some of this stuff is for really late game quests like Crisis that most players just don't get onto. One thing that has made this a little bit easier is that the traders have fixed prices, and so rather than selling on the flea market, where the prices are fluctuating all the time, you kind of have to keep a track of it, and it depends on which part of the wipe you're in, the trader prices are fixed, so we know how much we're going to get for each item when we loot it. So it's actually a little bit easier in some ways in the hardcore wipe, but obviously we can't buy anything, we have to find everything ourselves, which is where the difficulty comes in. So at the beginning, we've got valuables. These are obviously the most valuable items in the game, kind of by definition. They usually come from safes and places like that, but there are other places too. Items like Ledexes, for example, these can come from med bags. Any item in the game, pretty much, with some exceptions, can spawn in duffels as well. So you should just be looking out for these items when you're browsing around the maps normally. Now in this category as well, I didn't list them all specifically, but we've also got other items, things like the colored labs cards. So obviously you're looking out for those too. And then there's also things like keys that are rare, because sometimes you just might not want to run them. If we go and have a look at my particular character, one useful thing about this new table in here is you can go to a trader like Therapist and you can search in the searching table, and then you can look up marked. And so I've actually got two of these marked keys. You can see they actually sell for 112,000 rubles. So it's about 12,000 rubles per use. So you should be looking out for these as well. Any keys that say marked on them, any of them like check 15 that are good keys, these sell to therapists for quite a lot of money. So you should be looking out for those as well. I obviously haven't put those on the list because there's quite a few different ones. So if it looks like a special key, if you've never seen it before, just put it in your secure container, take it out and just check and see what it sells to for therapists, and you'll get an idea fairly swiftly. Obviously outside of those, we have things like the Ledex. The king of the category for just general items is the Bitcoin. The sell value isn't quite as high as last wipe because the trader repurchase value is about 20% lower than it was previously. So they sell for about 700k now versus 850k or something at the end of last wipe. Feels like multiple millions because of how expensive everything else is and how hard it is to actually get that 700k from other sources. So you should always be looking out for these Bitcoins, and you can put them in your secure container. There's no quest for them except for this old patterns one. This is the one on EOD where you can make your pockets bigger, like Unheard, and it requires 15 Bitcoins and it's really late on. So don't worry about it too much. You'll probably have the Bitcoin farm by that point if you're going for that quest. Before we go any further, let me just explain what the colors mean. So I've tried to sort this out so that you can figure out what you can sell and what you can't. This light green here, this is the safe to sell. So I found a keycard holder in one of the marked rooms. It sells for 230,000 rubles. It's not required for any quests. It's not required for any hideout upgrades. And so I feel like I can just sell this. Obviously it's useful for what it does, which is holding keycards, but I don't have any keycards now, and I'm not intending to have loads of them until much later on in the wipe. So this is a pretty good safe sell for me. The Bitcoin one is a slightly darker green. This means late, so Bitcoins are used for something, but they're used for something in the far, far late game. So unless you're thinking about speedrunning Kappa or something, you probably don't have to worry about it, and you can most of the time just sell it. Obviously, go and have a look. I've written down what it is exactly that makes it late rather than just completely safe to sell. But for most players, I think you can be able to sell these pretty safely. As I said before, Tarkov is a complicated game, so I haven't included every single barter in this. I've just focused on, is it quest required and is it hideout required, with one specific exception that's further down. But the idea about this is to not end up getting rid of stuff by accident that you're going to need. So the Ledex is in the mid-range category for both the hideout and for quests. So now that the hideout item amounts have doubled, you need 2 of these for the med station level 3, which I think is sort of at the end of the mid game, but it's still mid game as far as I'm concerned. And you need 1 for private clinic, which is the one that gives you the thick items case, and then there's 2 more for the late game, which is for crisis. This means that you're probably wanting to hold on to the Ledex unless you don't care about those quests because you never normally reach them, in which case you can sell it for 465,000 rubles. As a surprise to me, the portable defibrillator was 4th on the list at 101,000 rubles. This is required later on for ambulance and then 3 really, really late game for crisis. You can actually craft these in med too, so you're probably okay to just sell these. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go through every single item because otherwise this video is going to take forever. But what you're going to want to do is look through, say, VPX, and you say, okay, well, what do I actually want this for? I have to use 2 of them to get to Bitcoin 1. So do I want to sell this for 70k now? Or do I think I'm actually going to regret doing that, especially given that you don't need them found in raid anymore for this? So I'm just going to pick out some interesting ones. So the Lega medals, obviously we can't use these at the moment because we can't actually buy anything off ref. So if you do have arena, then you should probably save your Lega medal rather than selling it for 68k. They used to sell for loads, by the way. They used to sell for hundreds of thousands. So these have been nerfed quite a lot. But you can barter these for the various keys. There's the 4 different keys on the 4 different levels of ref. I think the keys actually sell to therapists for more than this. So you're probably better off just, even if you don't want to use the Lega medals, just keeping it, bartering it for the key, and then selling the key once fence becomes open. But those keys are pretty good and tend to get you decent items, so it's probably a good idea to keep them. So obviously what matters is value per slot. This is why the Moonshine ends up only being 45k, because that takes up 2 slots, because you could technically put in a Vertex and a lab card or something instead and actually have greater value. So the column that you want to be focusing on is this value per slot, and that's how this is sorted in the first place. If we just look at the ones in green, body armor repair kits are useful, but you can just repair with the traders, so it's not actually that big of a deal. Gingy keychains drop on scavs, so you should be looking out for those fairly often. Some of these other items, if you're a new player, you're probably just not going to see them, whereas things like Gingy keychains you can actually get on scav bodies. I'm adding in this little extra segment because I forgot to talk about it at the time when I did the video, but the Gingy keychain is probably the best streamer item. However, you do want to be looking out for pretty much all of the streamer items, so familiarize yourself with the list, and they're basically all really good money, except for maybe 2 of them. You've got the Sprat and the Devil Dog Mayo, so the food stuff are usually not quite as good, but all of the others, they sell for pretty decent values, so you should make sure you're picking up those when you can if you're trying to specifically make money. Do be aware that there are a couple of them that are used for other things, so the Fire Clean is used in the Workbench level 3, and the Axel Parrot and the Mayor Golden Egg are used in Living High is Not a Crime, along with the Raven. Other than that, if you're not going for Kappa, you're pretty good to just sell these. The figurines are another interesting one. These ones are technically free to sell, because they are prestige items, which means that they're very, very, very late game. There's the one quest for prestige, which comes after collector with fence for where you get your kappa, but there's also some cult circle recipes in these. So for the figurines, you're going to want to go and look specifically at what the figurine does. I'm not sure if that still works in this wipe, but previously, for example, if you were doing the boss killing quests and you needed to kill Rashala and take his golden TT, quite often people end up stuck in a situation where they've killed the boss, but they died getting the TT out of raid. Well, last wipe, you were able to put in a Rashala figurine into the cultist circle, and when it was finished, it gave you a golden TT one time. It was a one-off thing, so you couldn't do it every time. But as a one-off thing, you got the golden TT, and you could hand that in to Jaeger to finish your quest. Same thing with the Killer helmet, for example. It's often a lot easier to kill Killer and then die than it is to kill Killer and then take his helmet and then leave the raid, meaning you have to do it again. But if you put the Killer figurine into the cult circle, you got the Killer helmet, you can hand it to Jaeger. So it made these boss quests a lot easier. So depending on exactly what the figure is, go and have a look and see if there's a recipe for it, like a one-time recipe, because you might want to keep it for that. Some of these other ones, like the G-Phone X, I probably will keep, because I know later down the line at level 4 skier, there's going to be voodoo barters and things like that. And if we're not going to be able to use the flea market, then I want to be able to use those barters myself. There's also a flash drive craft in here as well. But if you don't want to do those things and you're desperate for cash, you probably just want to sell this now. Okay, in the next category, we have the info items. So these are the ones that you sell to Peacekeeper because they sell for dollars. The best one here is the secure magnetic tape, because you don't really need them until Intel Center 3, and for that you need the special labs items, and most people don't do it. So these ones sell for $434, which is about the equivalent of 63k, so this one is pretty good. SAS drives are just completely free, you can just sell those, doesn't even matter. The other ones though, you do need them for certain things. So topographic maps, for example, you need those for Intel 1. Intel itself, you need 2 of those for Intel 1 as well, so you might want to keep those. You've also got SSDs, which you need for Security 3, and Slim Diaries for the library. The Slim Diary, there's also a barter for the Slim Diary too, which allows you to get Thor armors, so that one can be quite useful to hold on to, but just have a look through the list and make sure that you're comfortable selling them. Now on meds, I put the LEDX back in here again, because this can spawn in med boxes. You have the ophthalmoscope. The reason why you want to keep this is basically the same as the LEDX. You need 2 for med station level 3, because previously you needed 1 of each, now you need 2, and there's also 1 required for private clinic, so you end up needing 3 of these as well as LEDXs. Outside of this, the next best items to sell are going to be things like the AFAC at 19,000 rubles and Aquapeps at 14k. It's kind of funny because previously you'd have things like Augmentin, which would sell for loads on the flea because of the craft, but there's going to be no flea, so you're not going to be able to sell them to anybody, so these only sell back to therapists for 6,000 rubles. So it's basically med kits, some of the bigger painkillers, and Aquapeps are the best in terms of the meds. Do be careful about your multivits, because you need that for Med Station 1, and that was a bit of a sticking point for me in this particular wipe. Next, we have the tools. These ones are more annoying. They don't give you as much money, so even the best ones here are like 30 to 20k per slot, which is still pretty good, don't get me wrong, but a lot of these items you need. The most free one is the Cyclone, because you don't need that for really anything, and that gives you 19,000 rubles per slot, which is pretty good. So outside of this, you basically just need to dodge around between the various modules that you might want to build. Pipe grip wrenches and ratchet wrenches are the best, but these are required for booze generator, stash 4, water collector 3, and gear rack 3. I personally don't really care. Anything to do with the gear rack and the weapons rack, I'm not that bothered, because those things we can just do later down the line. They don't block any progression, and it doesn't really matter whether you've got them or not. But stuff like generator 2 is really, really important. So the bulb X's, you're probably going to want to have to keep them, and one of the best things you can do now is just lock them. So if you go into your stash, you can have a look. You can now see how many we've got. I've got one here, and you can actually just lock them straight from here if you want to. So this makes it a lot easier being able to use the item search. Dry fuels are obviously a big problem. Sewing kits are annoying because they're an auxiliary item as well as being used in various modules too. 4 for lavatory 2, 1 for the gear rack. And if you do accidentally end up using all of them, you then can't craft ripstop anymore, which is really annoying. With the doubling of the hideout items, you often need quite a few of these things. So just make sure that you aren't going to screw yourself by selling these things, and they only sell for about 10 to 15k as well for the decent ones. You do have ones further down like the nippers, the flat screwdriver, eagle gunpowder, UV lamps, and flat screwdrivers short, which are sort of 6 to 8k each. You know you can definitely sell them. And same with power banks as well, which is pretty good. But just keep looking out for the good items, and once you've got enough, then you can start selling the extras. Next, we're going to look at 2 wearables. So look for bomber beanies on scavs and gas welder goggles. Gas welder goggles, you are technically free to sell. They're 15k. They can give you the best protection against flashlights. So if you're playing factory or something, or you're going to be fighting people in CQB, you could actually keep these because they have minus 35% brightness. I did a video about these relatively recently, and they are basically meta so long as you can deal with the negative 7% ergo. The bomber beanie, you're pretty much safe to sell this. This is better because it's only 1 slot rather than 2. Obviously, if you're not wearing it on your face, which you may well be. And the only usage for this is for dandies. So it's a quest where you have to wear one and kill scavs on streets later on. It's quite late down the line, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. You can probably just sell these for now. So next on food and drink, most of these are good to go actually. Most of the good ones are okay to sell, which is quite handy. So you've got whiskey, tea, condensed milk, and rat colas. These go for over 10,000 rubles. You have sugar itself, which goes for 10k. Yes, this is a moonshine craft later, but right now we probably don't care about that. And then you've got a few others like Tarka, herring, and emergency water rations, which go for a relatively decent amount of money. Emergency water you probably want to hold on to for the Salewa barter, and herrings are useful for the whole Dilnik as well, but those aren't unlocked yet in this particular wipe, so we can't do them. You have to be a bit careful with these, the beef stew, squash, Magica coffee, the small beef stew and noodles, because these are needed for early quests, and you need some coffees for the nutrition unit level 3 later on. Adyonkas are also okay to sell, but they only sell for about 5k, so they're not really worth it. Next up, we've got a couple of barters and crafts that are useful at level 1. We have the VHS tape. This one's called the Cyborg Killer Movie or something. This is a capper item technically, but if you combine this with a military flash drive, you can get a dog tag case out of this and sell it for 155k, which is quite a lot more than the sum of the 2 individual parts. This makes the value per slot in an actual raid 51,000 rubles, which is really good because the VHS takes 2 slots and the military flash drive takes 1. So put those in your secure container and you'll be getting 51k's worth of value out of them. The insect wrench into an Uzi is pretty good. You can sell that at mechanic for 35,000 rubles, and the value per slot there is about 17,500. One other that's alright is the yellow pliers. They don't sell for much on their own, but you can turn them into round pliers in the workbench level 1, and then they sell for 12k as well. So the pliers are sort of 12,000 rubles. You're probably not crafting loads of stuff in the workbench 1 right now, so it's not maxed out. So there's no opportunity cost just doing this and turning it into something with a bit more value. Now that we've got a few more items in the special slots, you can pick stuff up there as well. The compass, you do get this off Prapor. You probably won't find one in raid, but if you do search mission, you get a compass. And if you don't need it, you can just sell it for 30k, which is quite cool. Red flares you do pick up off scavs sometimes for 13,000 rubles. You can stick them up in the special slot. It acts like a new secure container for that item, and that means it only takes up 1 slot as well. And also you can pick up paracord and sell that for 10k if you want to too. Now paracords, you do need them for Ragman at some point later down the line, but you can craft these at higher levels of lavatory, so it typically doesn't tend to be a big problem. Now I did say that this list wasn't going to be exhaustive because there were just so many items in this damn game. And one of the things that you should be looking for is armors that have got an expensive base layer. So these ones are things like the slick, the tequila rig, stuff like that. Basically anything that normally comes with a class 6 plate is usually really, really expensive. And so what you can do is you can take out the good plates, you can sell the rig base to Ragman, and then you can put plates in something else that's a bit cheaper. This works well with things like the slick because they sell for 130k-ish on their own, and the tequila rig sells for 100,000 rubles. What really matters in this game right now is the actual plates themselves. They do most of the heavy lifting, and so typically you can sell the expensive rig and then put it into something more cost effective. Some of the other ones that you should look out for are things like the Tasmanian Tiger SK. There's the other version of the Tasmanian Tiger as well, which is really, really pricey. So if you get something that looks kind of endgamey and comes with class 5 or 6 plates, it is always worth taking the plates out and just seeing how much you'll get when you sell it to Ragman, because sometimes it's worth it. Another one that is good is head armor. If you think you're just going to get head eyes anyway, you have things like the slat plate, the bastion, there's the Kaiman applique. All of those, they sell for quite a lot to the traders, so make sure you keep those if you're wandering around. and also some of the high level face shields as well. If you find a masker face shield that's class 6, things like that, you probably don't have a masker to put it with, so you can sell those to Ragman again, probably for something like 36k. I think the Vulcan one is about 30,000 rubles, so that's about 15 or 20k-ish a slot, which is not that bad in this wipe. A few other things that can be quite good is high-end ammo. You might not want to fire something like 545 Igolnik because the pen is just completely off the charts and the damage is a bit low for this point in the wipe, and that sells for a pretty decent amount. Same with things like SSAAP, MAIAP, M993 762 NATO, and probably even FMJ for 338 Apua. You also probably won't be surprised to hear that big scopes sell for quite a lot of money, as well as suppressors for the large calibers too. Some of the suppressors are really cheap, things like the 9mm ones, but the higher powered cartridges typically tend to have more expensive suppressors, so again, look out for those in 338 and 762 NATO, because you may not have the guns for them, but they might be worthwhile taking and selling back to the trader. A few other random ones is things like underbarrel grenade launchers, which sell for about 30k each, or the Desert Eagle, because that fits in your pistol slot and sells to mechanic for about 30,000 rubles as well. Another kind of random one is posters. Posters you can find on walls, and they sell for somewhere between 25 to 50k to Ragman. So the final thing I've put on the list here is a big list of items that you might just want to keep an eye out for if you don't remember the exact questing tree. A lot of experienced veterans have got these items just firmly lodged in their head after many years of experience and painful practice when they realize that they haven't got quite the right things. But right at the beginning of the game for Gunsmith, you're going to want to find an HTD or a Sprut so you can actually complete that. For Therapist, you need the gas analyzers and the Salewas. Skier needs the TOS and the Module 3Ms. Jaeger is the Iskras, the Noodles, and the 2 Shonkers. You can make Iskras in the Nutrition Unit level 1, but you need Squash for that and a few other parts. The Salty Dog Sausage comes a little bit later on, but it's good to secure one early if you can. For the next sets of Gunsmith, you're probably going to need a 60 rounder for 545 and a 50 rounder for the MP5 as well. Skier requires flash drives pretty early on, and the next set of Therapist quests require Morphine. Mechanic, for his farming quest, you start to need power cords, T-plugs, PCBs, and then for his cigarette ones, you need Marlboro, Strike, and Wilston. You don't need Apollo, although those do barter for one of the tank helmet MVGs, so you might want to keep them anyway. Peacekeeper then needs Alkali, Clin, Bleach, WD-40, and hoses. Ragman later needs Ushanka's cowboy hats and fuel conditioners. Ski hat with hole for eyes, which is this thing. I've got one here, ski hat. This thing has just scarred me in many other wipes, so I always keep one as soon as I can. A pilgrim bag, and then after this it gets quite difficult. You're going to need a Gazelle armor. There is a barter for this, gold chains and coffee, and then Zabrallos, which is survey maps and relays. This one's all the So It Good quest line, which did get changed last wipe, so maybe it'll get changed again this wipe, I don't know. But previously you've needed the Wartech 109, 106s for that, Black Rocks, and then you're on to Living High is Not a Crime, which is the usual statue stuff. Lion, horse, cat, rollers, golden eggs, teapot, vases, axle parrots, ravens. As I said before, you will need paracords at some point, Keck tapes, and then for Peacekeeper and Lightkeeper, the hardest items typically in this is normally Vertex for doing Lend-Lease Part 2, and the CFDM radios if you play Lighthouse. If you don't play Lighthouse, it's very unlikely you're even going to run into these. But this is kind of a very rough and ready list of things that you should be looking out for, because you either need these items in the early wipe, or you should be looking out for them all wipe long, because they're really annoying. Final word that I have to say about making money is that unfortunately if you have Arena, that probably is the easiest way to make cash right now. You go into Arena, you play a few rounds there, and then you transfer over 500,000 rubles or 750,000 rubles, depending on whether you have a standard edition or an EOD/unheard account. It's a lot of money at this point in the wipe, and I think it kind of breaks the game a bit. Outside of this, you can still loot cash registers. They are still giving quite a lot. It's like 10 to 20k per go, which is pretty good. And also just make sure that you loot all your scavs, because scavs can have anywhere up to 100,000 rubles on them, which is a really big deal at this point in the wipe. So I hope this guide has been useful. I'll put a link down to the sheet at the bottom. If there's any improvements or anything else you want me to add on there, then just put it in the comments. If it's not too difficult, then I will try to do so. I probably missed out a few items because of just so many. Tried to list as many as I could, both from memory, from the wiki, from all the various tools that I use to cover the broadest base that I possibly could, and to make it actually a bit easier when you're looting through particular types of items so they're categorized together. So I hope this has helped. As usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, happy looting in your raids.